at the Bunting Road campus. So if any of you would like to find out more, you're welcome to come and visit me. We have great coffee as well. But I think we need to start with Haidar. He is, of course, the author of that book you see in front of you, but he's also a survivor of the extermination camp called Gaza. Haidar and his family, immediate family, survived, and thanks to our government and people in movements on the ground who made sure he was rescued. Unfortunately, many of Haidar's family members, first cousins, I think about 40 of them, including many students, some of whom I spoke to online. We had joint activities, as well as many of his colleagues, professors, who've been killed. And as you know, the killing continues. We all have witnessed the wanton brutality, the horrendous toll of people killed and maimed in Gaza. It's just over 5% of the population. And the equivalent of that in South African terms, if you can imagine, it's over 3.5 million South Africans killed in the space of just 6 months. The number of children killed is more than all the wars around the world in the past 4 years. We are talking about 15,000 children, excluding those who are buried under the rubble. We're talking about a population that is now facing famine, worse than starvation. Children and elderly people are dying exponentially, and the numbers are increasing. We're talking about 1 million cases projected of preventable infectious diseases, according to the World Health Organization. There are 60,000 pregnant women who are at risk, and we have 350,000 patients on chronic medication who can't get the medication, and of course, 10,000 cancer patients. So on the one hand, we have this ever-increasing death toll, and these are individuals, young and old, men and women, children. We just see the numbers. Every one of them had aspirations, had dreams, had loved ones. And today, in the 21st century, we see this genocide before our eyes. Many of you have followed the case that we took to the International International Court of Justice. That document, 84-page document, is very readable. It doesn't have a lot of legal jargon, but it's filled with references. It's a very scholarly piece at the same time, and a reference point, I'm sure, for future generations. It's widely available, and I'm not going to throw statistics at you, but it's best for you to have a look at it yourself. We've seen horrible massacres in the past few months. We've seen 500 people killed at the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. We've seen what they call the flower massacre. People who are trying to get food to survive, and then the apartheid Israeli regime fires on them, kills them while they're trying to get food. We've seen the hypocrisy of the West, when the US, which is the main sponsor and funder of the genocide, they supply the military hardware, the bombs, the tons of bombs, more bombs that was used in Hiroshima. They can put a stop to this, but they haven't. We are not fooled by the optics. They're trying to save face, the US and the EU, by dropping this food which is ineffectual, and in fact which is killing people and destroying the solar panels of hospitals. It's ridiculous. When there is a road, there are hundreds of trucks, 1,000 trucks waiting on the Egyptian side of the border to go in, and they can get it. So this is the hypocrisy, the double standards that we all know about. I'm going to stop shortly, but I would like to spend some time before we have our colleagues from Birzeit to talk about the intimate relationship between genocide and scholasticide. There's a professor, Palestinian professor at Oxford University, Kama Nabulsi, who coined the term. And she said, it's the slow, sadistic crushing of learning, a stifling of the life opportunities it provides. This was before October 7th. It's no longer slow. I don't want to mention the statistics, but hundreds of schools have been bombed, including United Nations schools. Thousands of students, over 7,000 students, school and university students, hundreds of lecturers, many full professors, poets. They are targeting the best of Gazan society. This is scholasticide, but scholasticide existed even before that, from 1948. I'm not going to go through those points right now, but just to end by saying that this depth of suffering of the Palestinians started in 1948 through settler colonialism, when the land, 80% of the land was taken away, where 750,000 Palestinians, indigenous people, were forced into internal and external exile through state terror, through terror of terrorist groups, people who then became prime ministers of Israel. And Israel is not just a threat to the Palestinian people. Israel had a very cozy relationship with our erstwhile apartheid rulers. 35% of the armaments from Israel ended up in South Africa in the 80s, when many relations, because of the BDS campaign against apartheid South Africa, stopped with countries. Israel continued. Israel also was used by the West and big companies, initially oil companies, to keep the region safe for these companies. But they also intervened at the behest of the West in many situations around the world, including South Africa, where they exploited labor in the Bantustans. They supported the military dictatorships of South America, of Central America, and they trained police services around the world, including in the US, with the Black Lives Matter movement, which was sparked off through the killings in Ferguson. The Louisville, St. Louis police forces were trained by Israel. Today, Israel has a special place in the world economic order through their high-tech security, through their armaments, which is field-tested on the bodies of Palestinian men, women, and children, largely in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, in southern Lebanon, in the Golan Heights, and elsewhere. So they play that terrible role. They are a threat to humanity. They have also violated every humanitarian law and convention and treaty that exists. Those conventions were put in place after the Second World War and Nazism. So they have made the world an even more dangerous place. So when we talk about solidarity with Palestine, it's first and foremost Palestinians who for 75 years have resisted. They understand that to stop resisting will mean they will not exist. But it's because of their steadfastness, their courage, their determination that they are still alive. But what they want to do now is create a genocide, as we've had a genocide in many parts of the world, not just the Holocaust, but of indigenous people in the Americas, of the Nama and Herero, the genocide by Germany. So Israel also plays a role in fueling conflict in our continent. I hear people say, but what has Palestine got to do with us? What about our own continent? You'll see the hand of Israel with those warmongers. They have been supporting warmongers on our continent. They have been exploiting the resources. They deal with blood diamonds on our continent. So when we talk about solidarity with Palestinians, we are also talking about our struggle. We are also talking about our continent, and we are talking about the world. So I'm now going to ask Haidar Eid, the book he wrote, a vitally important book in the next phase of the Palestinian struggle. It was written before the events of October the 7th, but it's more relevant than ever before. After Haidar Eid, we have Sundous Hammad online. She's the head of the Right to Education, based at Birzeit. Two students, Noor Al-Tamimi and Ahmed Sabube. And then we'll have Professor Stephen Friedman, whose book is also here. He might join us in person, but I think more likely online because he's part of the Time of the Writer event. And he's doing that, so he'll join us as soon as he stops. And then we'll have questions and answers for comments for about half an hour. And Professor Shahana Rasool from UJ will also give us the closing, but we also have people from the, Baso from the, of course, and they have been very supportive of our work. They continue to be, and we will be having the Shireen Abu Akhle lecture in May, likely to be addressed by our Minister Pando, and others, including Diana Bhutto, on May the 8th, and the International Office will also be assisting us with that. Finally, I just want to thank Sumaya. Anything else, Sumaya, Anisa, Naifa, as well as Shahana, for really putting this together with others. It's a very vibrant team. We're trying to have discussions at UJ. We really need to engage with you as much as possible. So Haidar, thanks. Haidar has been speaking nonstop since he's arrived in this country. We are totally in debt to him. He's dealing with many issues of grief, of worry, of trying to settle down with his two lovely, beautiful young daughters and his partner. And we thank him so much. He's just come from Durban. He was in Cape Town before, and I don't know how many other places. So we are very, very grateful that he's made the time to spend with us. Thanks, Haidar. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Salim. And I hope you will bear with me. I'm a little bit dizzy. I have high blood pressure, so I'm sure you will understand. As Salim, he very kindly introduced me. My name is Haidar, and I am an associate professor of post-colonial studies and cultural studies at what used to be Al-Aqsa University in Gaza. I want to start, I was thinking about the best way of approaching this topic, 76 years after the establishment of Israel. And at the same time, and the Nakba, at the same time, Salim and his colleagues wanted me to talk about the books, but I don't want to theorize. I really don't want to theorize, and I don't feel like, using academic jargon. And I just want to tell you about my personal experience in Gaza. And I also thought, of reading the names of the people I personally have lost. But that means I will spend the whole day just reading the names of the colleagues, students, friends, relatives who have died as a result of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Salim said that I have two daughters and my partner, and we are genocide survivors. Now, I am conscious of the fact that I'm a genocide survivor. And every single time, whether in Durban or in Cape Town or even here in Johannesburg, I have been saying this, that I'm conscious of the fact that I'm supposed to be dead. And I'm not saying this in order, you want me to hold this? Oh, all right. I'm saying this because I know it. Because I survived death. I survived the genocide. But at the same time, I saw amputated bodies of relatives, of colleagues, of students. And I remember giving an interview to Al Jazeera in 2008, and I raised one question at the time, and I'm repeating it. I repeated that question in 2012, 2018, during the Great March of Return, and in 2021. And I'm repeating the same question again. How many amputated bodies of Palestinian children does the civilized international community want to see in order to act? Very simple. 2008, and I've been through all the massacres, and I never wanted to leave Gaza. I never wanted to leave my family. I never wanted to leave my colleagues. In 2008, Apartheid Israel committed a horrendous massacre, killing within 18 days 1,200 people, including more than 430 children. And at the time, we raised the same question. How many amputated bodies does the international community want to see in order to act? We expected the international community to act. We did. Yes, every time I say it, we Palestinians are naive. Every single time, most of you watch Al Jazeera, you hear Palestinian victims of the genocide saying in Arabic, "Wain al-alam?" Where is the world? Where is the international community? And there is silence. Again, 2012, for a week, they killed more than 200 people, including more than 60 children. Again, naively, we asked the same question. And the world remained silent. 2014, for 51 days, I was there. I'm talking to you as a witness, that apartheid Israel is allowed
by the official bodies of the international community that were formed after the Second World War, Israel is allowed to carry out massacres. Now it is carrying out a genocide. Genocide, literally a genocide. Salim talked about figures, and he was right. But every single person has a story to tell. My former student, Khalil Abu Yahya, and he was a BDS activist, he spoke to me 3 hours before the house where he was staying with his wife, also a former student of mine, 2 of his daughters, 2 months old and 3 years old, were killed together with his in-laws 3 hours before his death. And he had dreams. He had just finished his master's degree in English literature. And he was thinking and he was dreaming of coming to South Africa. Where is Khalil now? Where are his dreams? Where is Tasneem, his wife? Where are his daughters? And what are we doing about it? Yesterday, more than 200 people were killed. A Shifa hospital was attacked. Since the beginning of this event, 2 kids have been killed. And we still have business as usual with apartheid Israel. Actually, I don't want to call it apartheid Israel. It is genocidal Israel. And any government in the world that still has business as usual with genocidal Israel is in fact complicit in the ongoing genocide against our people. In 2021, apartheid Israel decided killing hundreds of people. I've witnessed 3 massacres in their life. 3 massacres in their life. And they keep asking questions. Why are they doing this to us? No, seriously, I mean, how can I answer such a question? Why are they doing this to us? Why is the world allowing this to happen to us? And that's a question I myself, I'm still trying to find an answer for. Seriously. I witnessed, actually I was in Gaza when the genocide began. I spent 2 months, the first 2 months. I have been displaced 4 times together with my family. 4 times within 2 months. I've lost my house, I've lost my car, I've lost my neighborhood. On the 10th of October, I was contacted by a Zionist intelligence officer asking me to leave the area, a Rimal neighborhood. I left the building together with my family and I stayed with the neighbors. At the time, he asked me to go to the north. At that time, they were killing people in the north. And that's why I'm saying I'm supposed to be dead. And that night was the most horrific night of my life. And I needed to protect my family, my 2 little kids. They carpet bombed the whole neighborhood. Rimal is gone. And I needed to protect my kids. I closed their ears, and this is why I lost my hearing. 90%, I lost 90% of my hearing here, and about 50%. Am I complaining? No, because this is nothing. Nothing compared to what other people are still going through. Whole families, entire families were wiped out. More than 40 of my cousins, they had their dreams. Some of them wanted to further their studies. Some of them were about to marry. And now where are they? Gone. The figure, and I don't like to talk about figures and numbers, has risen to more than 32,000 people. There are still 10,000 people under Al-Anqad, the most hated word in Arabic, the rubble. More than 10,000 people. 72% of whom are children. 14,000 children. They target children deliberately. 76 years after the Nakba, Israel has moved from an apartheid state into a fascist state. Israel is committing another Holocaust against us Palestinians of Gaza. Israel has learned from Nazi Germany. Of course, so many people don't like us to make those comparisons. Excuse me, yes. In 2005, when I went back to Gaza and I wanted to help my people to join one of the universities, people said to me, no, don't use the A word. Don't say that Israel is an apartheid state. And I used it. And Israel is committing now another Holocaust with the complicity, but even the direct involvement of the colonial West. The United States of America, the UK, Germany, the European Union. But hey, we are resisting. We have learned from you, South Africans. And again, thank you, South Africa, for taking that bold step for the first time, taking apartheid Israel to the ICJ. But we've also learned from your resistance, from your struggle against the apartheid regime. We've learned from you endorsing 4 pillars of the struggle, the most important of which for us, myself, as an academic, is the BDS campaign. In 2005, in Palestine, Palestinian civil society issued a statement calling on the international community to boycott apartheid Israel, to divest from Israel and from international companies benefiting from our oppression, ultimately leading to sanctions against Israel. That was back in 2005. And now Israel is still committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. I'm coming from Gaza, and I have a message. I have a message from the people of Gaza, from Palestinian civil society in Gaza. Now, as I'm speaking to you, we need to put an end to the ongoing genocide. We need an immediate ceasefire. Because now I think 3 to 4 kids have been killed since Salim opened this session. 3 to 4 kids have been killed. And not only shelling, not only because of airstrikes, because we in Gaza are being deliberately starved. We, in fact, are being annihilated. People initially asked me, is Gaza a Bantustan? No. Gaza used to be a Bantustan between 1993 and 2000. That's what the signatories of the Oslo Accords called Surrender by Edward Said, and this is what my book is about. Then after 2000, Gaza has been transformed until now into a concentration camp. In 2006, we were asked to head to the polling station, vote for our representatives in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. That is to say, only 1/3 of the Palestinian people were asked to vote. I didn't vote. And I will never vote as long as there is occupation. I want my complete and total freedom. And then I will vote. But people voted against the will of the United States of America, against the will of apartheid genocidal Israel, against the Oslo Accords, and against the racist two-state solution. And this is why apartheid Israel, in cahoot with the colonial West, with the United States of America, with reactionary Arab regimes, has decided to impose a deadly siege on Gaza. Since 2006 until today, we have been deprived of milk, of cows, of cars, of chocolate, even of oxygen, of medicine. And the world is watching. The world is watching. And the world will go on watching as long as the world has business as usual with genocidal Israel. Thank you, South Africa. But that's not enough. Thank you so much, South Africa. Definitely. But we want post-apartheid South Africa to sever all diplomatic ties with apartheid Israel. You and I know that there are South Africans right now, as I'm speaking to you, killing Palestinian children in Gaza. South African soldiers, mercenaries that have decided to join the Israeli occupation forces. Now, what are you going to do about that? We want more concrete steps. You expected the international community to intervene, and you were right. You were right. It took the international community more than 30 years to heed your cause. Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist. The ANC in 1987, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan considered the ANC a terrorist organization. Where is Ronald Reagan? Where is Margaret Thatcher? In the dustbin of history. And we need your support. We want your support. Thank you, ANC. Thank you, the government of South Africa. Thank you, the BDS coalition in South Africa. But we need more. We want a ceasefire now. 2, we want the free flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. People are dying. People are being starved to death. This is the 21st century, people. 21st century. I mean, genocide in real time. Words do not bring back the dead. And if we don't take a concrete step right now, more people are going to die. You might see me tomorrow and I might tell you that my family is dead. Yes, we can cry. We can empathize, but is that going to stop the ongoing genocide? And this is why we need you to exert pressure in your government, whether in South Africa or other governments, to impose a military embargo on apartheid Israel, genocidal Israel. Without that, Israel is going to continue, is going to go on killing more and more children. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thanks very much, Haidar. We have some good news. Professor Stephen Friedman will be joining us in person. But I also need to say that there are over 90 people here, and there are over 65 people online. And the numbers are increasing. And this is important because this is the issue of the day around the world. We are now going to have Sundous Hammad, who has been involved. She's the coordinator of the Right to Education campaign for some time now. They do brilliant work. They have been doing over a number of years. Of course, what they do has much more urgency today. We need to say that education has always been very important for Palestinian society. For a long time, I don't know now, but per capita, they had more PhD people who completed their PhD than any other people around the world. And in 2022, according to the figures from the Ministry of Education, Gaza boasted 97% literacy rate and enrollment of 95%. Now, this is despite the incremental genocide over 75 years. It's a full-on genocide, as Professor Eid has explained. But despite that, and you know, in just 1 year, 2014 in Gaza, they bombed 138 schools and they killed over 300 children. That was in 2014. They've been doing this every few years, this horrible expression they use called mowing the lawn. So despite all of that, education has been really important for the people of Gaza and Palestine. Of course, they've been grappling with the siege, medieval-like siege. Haidar always reminds us of over 17 years, inadequate funding, inadequate infrastructure. But despite that, Palestinians have always put education as a clear priority. So please go ahead, Sundous. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shafrin. Power to impose its narrative and maintain the status quo. This mechanism of control is evident in the Israeli apartheid today in Palestine, where education becomes a crucial tool for resistance, and the pursuit of freedom and self-determination. Amidst this struggle, the intersectionality between the Palestinian and South African struggle and fight against apartheid emerged as a vital reminder of shared experiences and solidarity in confronting oppression that for us as Palestinians have been there since 75 years. In the context of Palestine, the Right to Education campaign stands as a testament to grassroots resistance, spearheaded by academics and students alike. Born in 1988, the first uprising in Palestine, out of the ongoing oppression faced by Palestinian academia, institutions, infrastructures, and academics and students. This campaign underscores the fundamental importance of education in the pursuit of human rights and liberation. However, even as Palestinians strive for their right to education, the Israeli apartheid persists in its systematic violations, particularly evident in the ongoing genocidal war in Gaza, moving from systematically violating the right to education to a total annihilation. The parallels between the Palestinian struggle and the South African fight against apartheid are striking, emphasizing the connections of global struggles against oppression. Both movements highlight the urgent need to solidarity, and collective action in challenging systems of injustices and colonialism. Just as apartheid South Africa faced international condemnation and grassroots resistance and ended by celebrating today 30 years of democracy, so too does the Israeli apartheid of Palestine demand of attention and solidarity. As Palestinians, we continue to resist and reclaim our human rights, especially our right to education. It is imperative for the international community today to stand in solidarity and in support of our struggles for freedom and liberation and self-determination. Only through collective action we can do that. Amidst the struggle for freedom in Palestine and after 165 days of the genocidal war on Gaza, the concept of scholasticide emerges. Dr. Salim just talked about it, and it's not a new term. As Dr. Salim mentioned, Dr. Carmen Abelsi coined that term back in 2009, after the first war in Gaza, after the siege. And today this term encapsulates the deliberate destruction and suppression of educational institutions and opportunities. The systematic targeting of schools, universities, students, and educational infrastructure by the Israeli apartheid forces represents a form of cultural and intellectual violence aimed at erasing Palestinian identity and resistance. This deliberate attack on education reminiscent of historical instances of scholasticide. Not only it robs Palestinians of their right to education, but also seeks to undermine our resilience and capacity for self-determination, which is the core of our cause as Palestinians. In this context, the intersectionality between the Palestinian struggle and other movements against the apartheid, such as in South Africa, becomes even more evident, underscoring the global dimensions of oppression and the urgent need of solidarity in confronting and dismantling systems of colonialism and apartheid. Today, the resonance with historic movements against apartheid becomes particularly special and important, especially on Human Rights Day for South Africa that you will be celebrating in 2 days. This day that commemorates the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, a brutal crackdown on peaceful protesters demanding for justice and equality. The echoes of that struggle reverberate, and it echoed across continents, intertwining with Palestinian quest for education and liberation. In both contexts, education was the battleground for human rights, where oppressive forces seek to suppress knowledge and erode cultural identity. Just as apartheid regimes attempted to control and silence dissent through violence, the Israeli apartheid employs that similar technique to subjugate Palestinian people. Yet in the face of adversity, Palestinian students, academics, and scholars, we all united, like our counterparts in South Africa used to do, to continue resistance and existence, asserting our right to education and self-determination. Today, as we reflect on Human Rights Day in South Africa, we are reminded that the universal struggle for justice and dignity between all people around this world underscores the global struggle against oppression, and that needs to stop. The oppression of Our people today in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in the diaspora, in the 48 occupied lands, needs to stop. By amplifying these connections and standing together, we can affirm our commitment to building a better world for Palestinians and for everyone, for every individual, for us as human beings can exercise our rights freely and without fear. Today, as we bear witness to the resilience of Palestinians in Gaza, I say that, and I'm almost crying because of this, because for the past more than 165 days, we have been like, us as Palestinians, we've been watching this genocidal war live streaming, and we can't do anything. For us as Palestinians, the only thing that we can do is amplifying the voices of Palestinians in Gaza. But you people can do a lot. South Africa going to the ICJ was amazing. And we want you to continue that. We want you to continue putting pressure on the international community to stop this insane genocidal war. Because the impact of this war is not only in Palestinians. That means that in today's world, at any time, injustices can happen and we can't do anything. So I think and I believe that every one of us has a role today in stopping this genocide. Today we can support people of Gaza and Palestinians by doing anything that we can, but most importantly, not only advocating for our causes as Palestinians, but also, as Dr. Haidar mentioned, boycotting and stopping any complicity with the Israeli and any ties with the Israeli institutions and with any universities that are complicit today in the genocide in Gaza. Also, you can raise and amplify the voices of people in Gaza. Today, we see the genocide in Gaza as, or some people see it as a place where they can, they can reflect the theory of today's war about genocide. But we need the people of Gaza to speak out, for them to decide what they want to do after the war. This is something really important that we need to highlight, because talking about stopping the war, ceasefire now, and what is next, everyone is putting his scenario or her scenario, and the government has different scenarios, but what about the people there who will survive this genocidal war with the loss of many of their family members, many of their dreams and ambitions, and without any homes to go back to, and without any memories of the places that they used to be gathering with their families, and without universities, without schools, without anything. I think it's really important also, while we are talking about rebuilding hope in Gaza, and we about talking about how we can help the people of Gaza, it's really important to amplify the voices of people such as Dr. Haidar, that they know better than us what Gaza needs and what Gaza people needs today. And I will finish my presentation speaking about again the importance of today working together to end this and to believe in our intersectionality of the struggles that we, not only with South Africa, but all the people that face oppression in this world and still facing. Today we have the power as people to dismantle this. And we have the power to change the status quo. So please do, and please continue what you are doing. And thank you again for inviting us.
Thank you so much, Sundous. Our hearts and minds are with you, and you can be assured that we will do our best to amplify what you have said, to be involved in very concrete ways, because words are not enough. We need much more than words. We need to make this genocidal regime a pariah state. And where we are in our schools and in our universities, we need to educate people, and we need to give momentum to the boycott campaign. I think it's important for us to note that a few of us in 2010, I think it was, Professor Friedman, 2011, when we had this campaign around Ben Gurion University, what happened, and it needs to be said, what happened is Ben Gurion University had a relationship in the apartheid years with what was called the Randse Afrikaanse Universiteit. They had cooperation. The universities, especially the ones set up by the apartheid regime in our country, worked very closely with Israeli universities, but they also worked together on many other things. There's a book by Sasha, I can never remember his name, but right, Stephen will tell you about the book, but he documents some of this relationship. And a local donor to UJ wanted to revive this relationship. It had to do with water research. But at the same time, Amnesty International issued these devastating reports. One was titled "Thirsting for Justice," that shows how water is stolen from Palestinians and how the settlements are built in order to have access to the aquifers, and how they bombed the power plant that supplies people of Gaza with water, kidnapped the chief engineer, etc., all at the time. And we were successful in this university. I was very proud because we had a secret ballot. We had a vote in the Senate, and the overwhelming majority of Senate members said, we need to stop links with Ben Gurion University. And that made a big difference throughout the world. Many people think, what can we do? We South Africans, we're very far. You know, we don't have a lot of trade. We do, but I'll come to that. But there's many things we can do. You've seen that with this ICJ case, the impact it had around the world. The genocide continues, of course, but let nobody tell you that we can't make a difference. My final point before we hear from the students, because we want to encourage our students to engage with the students of Palestine. In the same way, the generation I come from, the Sasso generation, the Saz generation, engage with students around the world to get solidarity. And solidarity is not an act of charity, Samora Machel said. It's allies fighting on different terrains. What happens in one part of the world affects the other part, as I said in the introduction. So when the Black consciousness organizations were banned, when Steve Biko was killed, it was really, our struggle was sustained and supported by students and academics around the world. We called for a boycott of apartheid institutions that did make a difference. And this is what the Palestinians are calling for. There are many concrete things we can do, which we will discuss later on. But for now, let's hear the voices of the students. And then we're very glad that Professor Friedman has come. We knew he's going to join us late, but the organizers insisted we have to start at 2:30 because people have to break their fast in occupied Palestine as well, earlier than us here by 2 hours. So apologies, Professor Friedman, we're very glad you are here. But let's hear the students first before we have Stephen. Thanks. Please go ahead, Noor Al-Tamimi, Ahmed Sabube after that.
Hello everyone, thank you for your this webinar. I will talking about the education in the West Bank under the Israeli occupation. So I will start in a short introduction, and then I will talking specifically about the situation in the West Bank. In the view of escalating occupation violation in the West Bank, and due to fear of Israeli soldiers assault with more restriction to Palestinian movements, all 34 higher education institutions in the West Bank, which include more than 139,900 students switched to distance learning starting 9th of October. So here I will share with you guys a story that can be shared with you since the war of Gaza starting. On Monday, 26th of February, was the first day of the second academic term in Birzeit University. And the University Council announced the decision of getting back in-person education for this academic term to resist all what hinders access to campus just one day before the term starts, specifically on Sunday. The Israeli occupation arrested a student from Birzeit University. His name Ali As-Saadi, aware to checkpoint, while he was in his way from his home in Jenin refugee camp to his dorm in Birzeit University. In Birzeit town. These innocents put more pressure on the Palestinian University to always stand against all operations their students and faculty members are facing on a daily basis. So I will also talking about the last year, what happened specifically on August. On August 2023, the UNRWA issued a report on the freedom of movement, the Palestinian accessibility in the West Bank, which listed 645 permanent blocks throughout the West Bank. Well, the military blocks make up a filter, part of a large system concerned with enforcing hindrance on accessibility. Due to due to security allergens, this system hinders Palestinian in the West Bank and plays a part getting it off from itself. The system includes the apartheid as well. We can say 95%, which is in the West Bank, at all. Moreover, the complete stage on Gaza since 2007, which currently faces a genocide. So the violation of the freedom of movement by the Israeli occupation, whether through the blocks of the stage on Gaza, has made the education in Palestine resistant, resisted local one that is unassigned from its own society. Well, at Birzeit University, by the way, it's my university, around 57% of the students are from Ramallah, and it is shorting a village. The reality faces the student and their parents to choose the nearest university possible, which means the indirect control of occupation over student education choices. So I was talking also about the Israeli occupations in what happened, what did and what's still doing in the West Bank in education. The last Israeli managements readjusted for entry and registry and versions in Judah and Samira region. The new directive grants the Israeli military the absolute right to protect which international actually academic research and students may be present at Palestinian University, as well as impose their own we can say arbitrary criteria on which fields of study are permissible and what qualifications are acceptable. Also, I want to say that the cumulations of Palestinian education and the qualitative management of the student movement at Birzeit University. So, student movements and councils in Palestinian University, go all the way back to 2019 and 7 and 1019 and 9. Their significant impact on political levels and role mobilizing the students for national political action caused the occupation to impose absolute to and banishment upon these student. So, Student Council in Palestine, in Palestinian University, and their active participants have always been and is still subjective to constant attack and harassments from the Israeli occupations. So I didn't speak specifically what the Israeli occupation do, because it needs a lot of time to talk. But I will answer you guys about all the questions that you need in your answer. So thank you for your inviting, and thank you for your listening. I hope Palestine will be free, inshallah.
Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Thank you so much, Noor. It's a reminder that while we are focusing, as we should, on Gaza, where over 5,000 students have been killed, over 9,000, over 10,000 injured, all the universities bombed, hundreds of educators and lecturers killed, that in the West Bank as well, there is a reign of terror. There are pogroms happening. Many Palestinian students in the universities cannot go. They are being hunted down. They are being terrorized and arrested. We have a partnership with UJ, has a partnership with Birzeit University. And it's shameful that we don't have an official campaign as a university for the students and lecturers at Birzeit. Many of them have been arrested. They continue to be arrested. The last was a few days ago. Many of them are being tortured in prison. So thank you so much, Noor, for reminding us about those issues. We now turn to Hammad. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you, but again, if you could speak a bit louder, Hammad, thanks.
Okay, I'll try. Thank you. So first of all, thank you all for organizing and attending this event, and thank you, South Africa, for standing and supporting Palestine. And thank you for everyone for attending this event. So after my colleagues talked about West Bank, I will be talking about the situation in Gaza and specifically the education in Gaza, and tell you a bit about Palestine. But first of all, I want to share my screen. Is my screen visible now for you? Okay. So I know that you people in person might not see the screen very clearly, so I will be sharing the slides link with you all if you want to check it after the presentation. So first of all, I'll give you an update on Gaza.
Okay,
sorry?
no, please go ahead. We can't see it very clearly. If you just enlarge it a bit,
Okay,
yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so all of the data that you will see here are from the United Nations Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and also there are other resources that I also listed and referenced on the right. So starting with a brief geography lesson, this is Gaza Strip right now. I won't go a lot in details because we want to focus on education. But as you can see, there is 3 crossings in Gaza. One in the north, it is in red because it's closed now, and 2 in the south. One is called the Rafah crossing, and the other is called Karm Abu Salim crossing. And both of them are now partially open with pre-approved goods and people. One is controlled by Egypt, and the other is controlled by Israel, and most of the aid go through there. And Israel do monitor all movement through those both borders, even the one that Egypt controls. So moving to the casualties in Gaza up to yesterday. Up to yesterday, during this genocide, there was 31,726 people killed in Gaza, in addition to a reported 7,000 people missing or under the rubble. Also, there is over 73,000 injuries in Gaza. As you can see, both injuries and fatalities have been increasing almost steadily since the start of the war. This shows that the aggression has not listened, like Israel keeps its violent aggression at the same rate since the start of the war, even after the ICJ file and even after they were accused of the possibility of committing a genocide. Among these casualties, there were 48 civil defense members, 348 Palestinian medics, over 120 Palestinian journalists, and about 171 UN staff killed in this genocide. Moving toward the electricity in Gaza, again, I will not go into detail here, but I wanted to show you this to see that this has been a long, ongoing situation in Gaza. It has been hard for them even before October 7th. In these figures, you can see the supply and demand, and you can see the hours of blackout of electricity in Gaza. Everything in gray in the bar charts means that there was no electricity. And you can see that it is a problem from 2017 even, that there wasn't a single day where Gaza got a full day of full electricity. And of course, since October, there is no electricity at all after Israel decided to cut electricity and water on Gaza. Moving to the housing units and the damage that they try to cause. Now, we all know that Israel is trying to cause as much damage as it wants in Gaza, and it is not precise bombing as they claim. So they have bombed over 60% of the housing units in Gaza. There was at least 3 churches and 223 mosques bombed in Gaza, whether partially damaged or fully damaged. And there's about 150 health facilities and 126 ambulances bombed. Among those, there were over 70,000 housing units and over 290,000 partially damaged housing units. Moving to the food situation in Gaza, these pictures are according to the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. As we can see that there is 5 levels or 5 classifications of famine in terms of food, and currently all of the governorates in Gaza are in the 4th stage, which is the emergency stage, and some of these governorates have parts of it which is in the 5th stage, which is catastrophe stage. And we can see that the percentage in the northern governorates are higher than the ones in the south and in the middle, because Israel is preventing any aid to enter the north. And also, this is the projected view for the next 4 months. If the situation continued as it is expected that the northern part of Gaza will be in complete famine in the next 4 months. And also, there is an increase in the rates of stage 5 in the middle and southern areas. Now, you might be wondering, why is this famine, and why the famine problem is not decreasing and it cannot be solved? It is because the main source of aid, which is trucks, are all have been the amount of trucks have been decreasing since the start of the war. On average, before this genocide, there was an average of 500 trucks entering Gaza per day after they were heavily checked. But after October 7th, as we can see in this figure, there hasn't been a daily average higher than 190. And this just shows you how much of lack of supply there is for Gaza Strip, and all of the other alternatives, whether they are through ships or airdrops, all of these are just a non-efficient form of aid. Now, moving to the important part here, which is scholasticide. Now, you have heard the term scholasticide from the presenters before me. I don't want to define the scholasticide. Rather, I would like to present data and images about scholasticide. And let's see together, is this a scholasticide among this genocide or not? First of all, here are some numbers from this aggression. Right now, 100% of students, whether they are in schools or universities, have no education. They have no access to education, which is about 600 students. Also, there is 378 schools which are damaged, 117 schools sustained major damages, and about 11 higher education buildings were partially or completely damaged. Also, Israel murdered, killed over 4,000 students in Gaza and 37 students in the West Bank during this aggression, and about 220 teachers and administrators. Of course, these numbers are by January 26th, so by now, after 1 month and a half, I am sure that all of these numbers have increased. And also, Israel have injured over 7,500 students in Gaza. Now, again, is this a scholasticide? Let's see those pictures. On the left, you can see the picture before and after of the Islamic University of Gaza. On the upper part, there is the university before. And of course, the Islamic University of Gaza has been targeted in multiple aggressions in 2010s. It is not the first time that it gets partially or completely damaged. Sorry. On the right, there is Al-Azhar University also before and after. Here is Isra University, where it appeared on a video that Israeli forces have published when they were bombing the university. On the bottom, there is Al-Quds Open University, also in Gaza. And finally, here's Al-Aqsa University. It is the university of Professor Haidar that he told you about. You can see those pictures all after the destruction of the university. Now, again, is this a scholasticide or no? Let's see this list. I was amazed to see this list. It's my first time seeing it today. It shows the number of professors who were killed since October 7th by Israel. There is a total of 94 professors who were killed by Israel. 3 of them are university presidents. 7 of them are faculty deans, and all others are professors who teach in universities. All these show you that Israel do target education. It do commit a scholasticide against Palestinians, and this has been the case since a lot of years. But as we said in the beginning, it is becoming a fast scholasticide rather than a slow one that they used to do before. Now, after showing you the situation in Gaza, I would like always to show you, and by you I mean people who are pro-Palestinians outside Palestine, and I want to show you your effect. So these data were by Reuters magazine by October 27th, and it shows the amount of pro-Palestinian demonstrations against the pro-Israeli demonstrations. And it just shows what the people believe, and it shows what is the right side of history is. I was also happy to see that South Africa had more pro-Palestinian universities, pro-Palestinian protests than pro-Israeli protests. As I can see from this figures, there were only 2 pro-Israeli protests in South Africa by October 27th, 2023. Meanwhile, over 6 or 7 pro-Palestinians, and they were larger on scale. This is also other pictures from the Middle East, from the amount of difference of protests. This is in Europe and North Africa, and this is in the US. Finally, I wanted to thank you again on behalf of me and all students and Palestinians for South Africa. Thank you for standing with us as government and as people. And we wish that we can further collaborate together to end this apartheid of Israel and to end the Israeli universities' complicity in this war. And I hope that we reach the level where we completely boycott Israeli goods and relations, and more importantly, Israeli relations with Israeli institutions. Thank you, and I will leave the floor for Professor Friedman.
Thanks very much, Hammad, for that very clear presentation, and we will share the slides. Please make sure you send it to us, and it'll be very valuable for our own education. We're going to have Professor Stephen Friedman, and then we'll have Professor Baso Nzenze, the Vice Dean of Internationalism. I know you've been sitting patiently for a while. We're going to have the question and answer session, but we do have refreshments after that, and we'll engage with each other even more fully after that. So thanks for your patience, Professor Stephen Friedman.
Can you hear me? No. Sorry, I'm what is called a techno-peasant. Salima, this is not working apparently.
No, it's not amplifying.
It's not amplifying. Oh Lord. Okay, so I have to be loud. Okay, I will try to be loud, which is something I'm not as good at as you might imagine. First of all, just an explanation. I don't know if it was explained. The reason I came late is because I was supposed to be in two places at once. So I had to do a session at the time of the writer on my book, and I came here after the session on the time of the writer. I can't not say anything about the book, and fortunately, the book does actually help me to do what I want to do, which is to build on something Salim said just as I came out, which I don't think is going to be a controversial issue here, which is the need to isolate the Israeli state, the need to build up pressure on the Israeli state. I mean, this is pivotal to what needs to happen in the next few years. And what I want to contribute to the discussion that hopefully stimulates some thinking among activists is what are the strategic issues involved here? I mean, what kind of battle lies ahead? I'm going to use two perspectives to talk about this briefly. The one is this book I've written, and the other one is an article which I wrote in a publication called Africa as a Country, which appeared a few weeks after October the 7th. But before I talk about the article and what that means strategically, just a word on what the book is about, and then I'll try to show how that can be helpful to what we need to be doing in the future. The purpose of the book is to try to destroy a very important myth. And the myth is that I think that whether we are anti-Zionist or harbor Zionist sympathies, whether we are Jewish or we're not Jewish, whatever the case may be, I think a lot of people are, in a sense, assume that the Jews who support the Israeli state and the Jews who run the Israeli state are, if you like, the kind of hyper-Jews, okay? They're the ones who are really serious about being Jewish, and the other guys perhaps not so much. And what my book tries to show is this is totally false. That in fact, Zionism is not at all about being Jewish. It's not at all about making the world a better place for Jews, although most of us would argue that you can't make the world a better place for Jews unless you make it a better place for everybody. But even if you have that narrow vision, Zionism is basically about Jews wanting to become white Western Europeans who can dominate everybody else. That's essentially what it's about. And if you go into the history, which I do in the book, the early Zionists who were very interesting observation on Zionist point that's never made. The Jewish communities all over the world. There were Jewish communities in what is today called the Middle East, in the Levant, in Iraq, in Syria, etc. There was no Zionist movement in any of those communities. It was a non-issue. There were no Zionists there at all. The Zionists were all Europeans, even Western Europeans, either Western Europeans or Eastern Europeans. And what obsessed the Zionists is the fact that they felt that they couldn't be white Europeans like everybody else. A particularly important influence over the thinking of Zionism was a scandal in France in the late 19th century, a man called Dreyfus, who was a captain in the French army. And Dreyfus was falsely accused of treason and he was obviously targeted because he was Jewish, and in the end he was exonerated, etc. But the point about Dreyfus that influenced the Zionists so much is that Dreyfus had done what white Europeans to do. He joined the French army. He could go out and colonize Africans and murder people in Asia and all the wonderful things that people in the French army do. And that wasn't enough because he was Jewish. He couldn't be a full-blooded colonizer. And they desperately wanted to be full-blooded colonizers. One of the architects of the Zionist movement, the one who is probably revered the most, is a man called Herzl, Theodor Herzl. Herzl wrote a book, a novel, in which he spelled out what his ideal Jewish state would be. And what do we learn about this wonderful Jewish state on the land of the Palestinians in the middle of the Middle East? Its citizens get up every evening in their top hats and their tails and their dresses, and they go to the opera. And what language do they speak when they go to the opera? They speak German when they go to the opera. And Herzl tells us that what must happen in his Jewish state in the Middle East is that the men must learn dueling, because dueling, he says, brings French refinement to society. Dueling, if you don't know, is kind of aristocrats killing each other for fun. Okay. So what he's talking about is not a Jewish state at all. It's a European state in the middle of a place which is clearly not European. And that essentially has been what this is about all along. And that explains why, just one interesting phenomenon today, why the best friends, I mean, the Israeli state has lots of friends among the elites in Europe, but the best and most solid friends of the Israeli states are extreme right-wing racists who are also anti-Jewish. Okay, Viktor Orban in Hungary, Bolsonaro in Donald Trump, that kind of politician. Okay, and the reason why these politicians find no contradiction in something, I start off the book by pointing out, I'm sure most of you are familiar, January the 6th, 2021, the Capitol in the US, Trump claimed he'd been cheated, although it wasn't, of course. And they staged this demonstration, and there were two things about the demonstration which was interesting, which was that there were people in the demonstration wearing T-shirts saying 6 million were not enough. More Jews should have been killed by the Nazis, and they were carrying Israeli flags. Okay? So that tells you everything you need to know about that. Essentially, what this has been about is building a Western state on the lands of the Palestinians, colonizing on behalf of Westernness. And in the process, which is absolutely crucial for what I'm going to say, in the process, turning your back on everything it has been to be Jewish for the last 2,500 years, okay? Whether that's been religious Jewish or irreligious Jewish or whatever, all the ways of being Jewish, which existed up until then, the Zionists said they wanted to get rid of, because the new Jew is going to be a nice, muscular Western. One of them actually went there and got quite excited, and he said, some of these people have blonde hair and blue eyes. Isn't that wonderful? A proper colonizer if you have blonde hair and blue eyes. So that's the important point to remember about what my book argues about Jewishness, etc. When the term, and most of you in the room will presumably have had the experience of being accused of being anti-Semitic at some point. Okay. Now, join the club, that's fine. What you may be interested in knowing is that in Britain, for example, if you are a member of the British Labour Party, your chances of being accused of being anti-Semitic go up 20 times if you happen to be Jewish. Okay, because Jewish Labour members happen to be, because they're emotionally involved in it, happen to be particularly horrified by the Israeli state. So they're the ones who go to pro-Palestinian demonstrations, and they get accused of being anti-Semitic. And the reason this is happening is that the word anti-Semitic, which is a bad word, incidentally, it doesn't describe things very well. But let's leave, because the term that's used for anti-Jewish racism, which is really the accurate term. Anti-Jewish racism used to mean racism directed at Jews. You despise Jews. Incidentally, very importantly, those early anti-Jewish racists who wrote these books about how the Jews were inferior, etc., they also had a checklist of other people they didn't like. And who else didn't they like? Black people. Okay, Houston Stewart Chamberlain, it was the founder of anti-Semitism in a sense. He wrote a letter to the German Kaiser congratulating him on murdering Nama and Herero people in Namibia, which was the first German genocide was the Nama and Herero. And Chamberlain said, well done, and made a lot of racial insults in the process. They hated anybody they would have hated Muslim people more than they did. The only reason they didn't hate Muslim people that much is there weren't that many of them around where they lived. But had there been more of them around, they would have hated Muslim people too. They certainly didn't like Chinese people. I mean, we know, anybody who wasn't a white Westerner was the problem, etc. And what has happened, as I told you, Zionism is this attempt by some Jews to become white Western Europeans. It worked. Okay, so they are now fully card-carrying members of the White Western Club, and because they are card-carrying members of the White Western Club, they are allowed to do to Palestinians what they are doing today. Because my book's called Good Jew, Bad Jew, and the reason it's called that is that it was inspired by a book which some of you may know by my colleague Mahmoud Mandani, who wrote a book called Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. And one of Mahmoud's insights in that book, which I think is crucial, you can't understand anything that is happening to Palestinians today without that insight, is that for the white West, there are two kinds of wars. What he calls wars of the colonizer and wars against the colonized. And the wars of the colonizer, the European wars, are governed by rules. You can't kill civilians, you can't bomb hospitals, you can't attack schools, etc., etc. I mean, all this is supposed to sound familiar. But wars against the colonizers are governed by what he calls the laws of nature. You can do what you like to colonizers. So King Leopold can wipe out 10 million Congolese and it doesn't matter because they're Congolese. You're not allowed to do the same thing to white Western Europeans. And of course, we saw this just before, or a couple of while before October the 7th in Ukraine. White Ukrainians are entitled to rights. Palestinians are not entitled to rights. And that in a sense is the proof, the evidence that Zionism has now this ticket of acceptance. They're fully fledged white Europeans. It shows you why the white European elites react to Palestine the way in which they react, etc. But now, what has this got to do with the strategic issue? And what I argue in the article is that the October the 7th and the events after that is actually the Israeli state's sharpfall, which is a good point to make 2 days before Human Rights Day when we commemorate the Sharpeville massacre. And the importance of Sharpeville is when people compare the struggle against South African apartheid with the struggle against Israeli apartheid, there's very often a lack of history and there's very often a romanticization of attitudes. So you hear it said, but the world hated apartheid, that they didn't hate, that they don't hate Zionism, etc. Up until 1960, when the Sharpeville massacre occurred, the West was totally indifferent to apartheid. It either thought it was a good idea because it'd been doing much the same in Africa itself anyway, or it tutted a bit and said, well, these Afrikaners are a bit crude, we would have done it in a much more subtle way, etc. When Sharpeville happened, the people who governed didn't change at all. Okay, a year after Sharpeville, months after Sharpeville, in fact, the British had no problem about allowing this country to become a republic, despite the fact that the referendum which voted for it to become a republic was only white people participated in the referendum, and the British knew perfectly well that the state they were giving republic status to would be an apartheid state, which would oppress 90% of the population because they happened to be black. So it didn't affect the government one iota. But it began to affect people. People began to see what the system was all about. People began to see how horrific it was. And that image of Sharpeville became a way of mobilizing people around the world against apartheid. I mean, just as one example, it just gives a bit of color to it. in the battle to isolate apartheid sport, there was a campaign against the South African cricket team which went to England. And one of the posters the anti-apartheid movement used was, in effect, a sharpful poster. It showed you a white police officer attacking a black person. And the slogan was, if you could see their national sport, you wouldn't want to see their cricket. And that illustrated the brutality of what people were confronting. So I think that we're there. I think that the reaction to the genocide is not a flash in the pan. I don't think it's going to go away. And I think that we are beginning to see seeing the beginnings of the potential for a citizens' movement around the world against Israeli apartheid. Obviously, these things don't happen, they don't happen by the flick of a switch. It doesn't mean that, tomorrow morning, I'm continually asked, and it's a tragic question, what is going to stop the genocide? What is going to stop the occupation? And the answer, sadly, is that it's easier to talk about what will stop the occupation than what will stop the genocide, simply because it takes a long time it takes time to mobilize the resistance. And I wish there was a way of mobilizing resistance tomorrow, which would end the genocide. But what we're talking about is going to be felt over a period of time. And what you're beginning to see, which is precisely what we began to see after Sharpeville, is not only the demonstrations, and yes, the demonstrations are important, but also you're beginning to see solidarity with Palestine beginning to seep into everyday life. And I think that is incredibly important. I mean, it may, it's isolated incidents here and there, but they build up. When the poetry editor of the New York Times resigns in protest at their support for the Israeli state, when a Jewish film director at the Oscars gives a speech in support of Palestine, there are hundreds of examples like that. And over the next years, there are going to be thousands of examples like that, and they're going to snowball. And that is crucial, because Palestinians morally are in at least the same position as black South Africans were under apartheid, or worse. But there is one problem which Palestinians have, which black South Africans did not have. And that problem was that for all the apartheid state brutality, they relied on black labor. You could not have run South Africa for more than 5 minutes without the labor of black people. Sadly, the Israeli state doesn't need Palestinian labor in the same way. And that limits what people can do on the ground. It doesn't mean they can do nothing. They can do lots of things, but it creates a limiting factor which didn't exist here. And to me, that means something important. And what it means is that the international, that's where what Salim was saying is so important, the international struggle against Zionism is going to be more important than it even was in the case of apartheid South Africa. I think the battle's going to be, which doesn't, it doesn't mean Palestinian resistance is not important, it's crucial. But I think the battle for Palestine is going to be fought in the international arena. And when it is fought in the international arena, I think that the options for convincing people are much greater than they've ever been. And one of the assets, which might sound strange, but it is one of the assets in this battle, is going to be the changing opinions among Jews in Europe and America. Because I've talked about the strategic negative for Palestinians, but there is, in my view, a huge strategic positive for Palestinians, and it's this. If you'd said to any of us during the fight against apartheid that the best way to solve the problem is going to have lots of discussions with white South Africans and tell them to treat black people nicely, if you weren't laughed at, you should have been laughed at. It wasn't a particularly sensible thing to do. If I were to suggest now that we should encourage people to go and have long chats with Zionist Israelis and explain to them that that's not going to happen either. But you have a very large Jewish community in strategic parts of the world which has actually no stake in what happens. And that is a crucial difference. If Palestine were to be free tomorrow morning, the life of Jewish people in London and Paris and New York would not change one iota, okay? They wouldn't have to adjust anything. They would carry on living the way they had yesterday and the way before. And that is crucial. because it means that people have potentially an openness to alternatives which doesn't exist when you're actually dealing with the colonizing group directly, which has all sorts of interests in making sure that the colonization survives. And I think that's going to be a huge strategic resource. And what is happening increasingly is that this argument I make in the book, that being Jewish is not being Zionist, that being anti-Semitic is not being anti-Zionist, is becoming a more and more mainstream opinion among Europe. So it's not only people at demonstrations, but I was struck by something very interesting. It just shows you, we often look for how embedded these things become. I was asked again by Africa as a country to write a reply to a Harvard professor who had written, quite an offensive piece on how misunderstood the Israeli state was, etc. What I found interesting is that the same Harvard professor who'd written this rather pathetic defense of the Israeli state wrote at the same time an article in the Washington Post in which he assumed, he didn't say this was a possibility, he assumed that increasing numbers of American Jews would be anti-Zionist, and the article was, what do we do about that? How does it look like? Okay. Because he might be a fervent supporter of the Israeli state, but he can see the writing on the wall and he can say which things are going. I mean, with every passing year, the polls show less and less Jewish support in the US, never mind in places like Europe, for the Israeli state and what it's doing. And that's not the only factor, because it's not only that more and more people are becoming anti-Zionist, it's something else which might sound a bit strange, but can be quite important. More and more people are just becoming indifferent. They're just switching off and saying, look, these guys are not my kind of people. I'm not political. I'm not going to do anything about it. And I think that's just one indication of how things are going to change over the next while or so. And if you want to look at it in very concrete terms, look at the UK. Okay, so what you have these large pro-Palestinian demonstrations, and then the right-wing politicians, followed by the Jewish establishment in the UK, say the UK is now not a safe place for Jews on Saturdays because all these marchers come and support Palestine, etc. And then the Jewish marchers say, well, we feel quite safe actually, but at the moment, you get 100,000 people marching in London, there are 10,000 Jewish protesters who say we feel safe. My firm prediction is that within a year's time, there'll be 20,000, and the year after that, there'll be 40,000. This is a snowball and it's going to grow. So I think that's where I will conclude. I don't think one needs to stress how horrific what is happening to the Palestinian people at the moment is. We all know that. But I think something we academics can do is to assist, hopefully, in thinking not only about how horrific it is, but what we do about it. And I think what I've tried to show is that in the horror we're seeing at the moment, there is huge potential. And obviously the lesson to every one of us in that room, as Salim has said, is that we have to redouble our efforts. It is about isolating the Israeli state. It is about boycotting it. It is about BDS. But I think that we have an opportunity now to snowball this movement and to do some very serious thinking about how we make sure that the pressure is strong enough to free Palestine. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Friedman. Excellent as usual and very, very clear. There are so many points he's made. I'm not going to summarize, but just to say that we have been confronted with this for a long, long time, and it's wearing very thin to conflate our position against Zionism, which is a political ideology, as we've heard from Professor Friedman, totally aligned to colonialism and imperialism from the outset. His book documents this with many, many examples, and fewer people are being sold that canard, that deception, that fabrication. You know, we are told that, no, the struggle is between Jews and Muslims, etc. That is very far from the truth. Even our media, our radio and television calls it the Jewish state. And that is something we really need to push back against. Israel does not represent Jewish people. Throughout the world, including our country, more and more Jewish people are saying, not in my name. We have an affiliate, the Jews for a Free Palestine, one of the most vibrant affiliates of the South African BDS coalition. Professor Friedman made reference to what's happening in places like the US. Jewish Voices for Peace, thousands and thousands of young Jewish people occupying places, harassing the genocidaires, the Bidens, all of them, Hillary Clinton, on a daily basis. They can see the genocide happening and they are standing up. So that movement is happening and we are part of that movement. There are many activities we are involved with. On Sharpeville Day, Human Rights Day, the 21st of March at Constitution Hill, we hope you'll be there. We're going to have 1,000 people drumming for Palestine. 950 people have already confirmed, and with you, we'll make 1,000 at least. So please be there. But I also need to say that there's a lot of work to be done. There are these Christian groups which are challenged. They read the Bible in a particular way. They interpret it in a particular way. They are very pro-Israel, and they are deceiving our people in a horrible way. They must be challenged as they are being challenged. They make this very simplistic equation with what the Bible says about the Israelites, and they equate it to Israel. It is totally wrong. You know, I think it was Ilan Pappé, wonderful historian who's written, Israeli historian, who wrote about the Nakba in 1947, 1948, where 750,000 indigenous Palestinians were uprooted. He said that, you know, the leaders of, and I'm sure it's in, or reference to it or related things like that in Stephen's book, which was written like Haidar's book before October the 7th, long before, but it is as relevant as ever. So Ilan Pappé says, you know, the Zionist leaders, many of whom, by the way, are not even religious. Quite a few of them are atheists. But the one thing they agree with is that God gave them Palestine. You know, so I think that, you know, for me, shows how religion and Christianity is abused, misused. I mean, there are many things we have to educate ourselves about. Many people think Palestinians are just Muslims. They are majority Muslims, but they're also Christians. They're also atheists. You know, like us, they come from different walks of life, different orientations, etc. So I think this propaganda is wearing thin, and we must do everything, and it's part of the struggle to build this movement. For us in South Africa, the joyful thing to see is when you go on marches, at least in Johannesburg, when you go to meetings, when people discuss this, whether they're from the trade unions or students or academics or women's groups or faith-based groups, you see a diversity of people, because the Palestinian struggle also unites us not on this banal competitiveness, South Africa must compete in the world market, etc., but unites us on fighting against inequality, for social justice. You know, it was Steve Biko who said a long, long time ago that our gift to humanity will be to make people human. And that is an expression of what we see happening now with the Palestinian struggle. So Professor Nzenze said he would prefer speaking after the question and answer session. Comments, question, points for clarity. I know, Naifa, there are some questions online. Shall we take them first? Can I see them, or can you read them out? Or I don't see them. But in the meantime, please get ready with your questions, your comments. I'll continue speaking until I see a hand that shoots up. I think the final points that Professor Friedman made about what we should be doing, and he offered a few very important suggestions. At the moment, in many universities around the country, there are people debating this. They are putting resolutions to the Senate. Some succeed, some don't. But there are many meetings, and I've put together a list of things that we should demand, that we can demand. Some of these points are the University of Fort Hare. The council issued a brilliant statement on solidarity and the need for boycotting the Israeli academy, which is complicit in the oppression of Palestinians. But there are other universities, some of the people online. Professor Enver Motala has sent me what they've put together for the Senate discussions. It's still to be held, what they're trying to do. And I think we have our role to play at UJ. We have a long history, we're trying, but we really need you. Your student organizations, the SRC, we need us to come together with lecturers, with workers, because this issue affects us all in very many ways. So we have a question. Thanks for highlighting it, Naifa, from Lauren. Lauren, who asks, can any of the speakers please speak to what is the situation at school level for early grade, primary, and high school learners? So I'm not sure if Ahmed or Sundous or Noor would like to speak to that. I think they're distinguishing between university students and early grade learners. So if you can please go ahead, any of you. Sundous, would you like to respond? Shall I repeat the question?
Yes, please, because I want to know if are we talking about Gaza or West Bank?
I think both, probably. Yes. If you can. If you can't, maybe you could speak to West Bank.
So I'll be starting talking about Gaza. As Ahmed said, education there is totally paralyzed, meaning that all students don't have access to education. And more than 250 schools were bombed. So even after the war stops, for maybe a year or so, there will be no education because most of the schools are used as shelter for the displaced families. On another hand, talking about the West Bank, there is education going on in the schools level in the West Bank because mostly the schools contain students from the same area, so it's a bit easier for them to access the school without going through checkpoints. But again, some places in the West Bank, especially, for example, in Area C, according to Oslo agreements or Oslo Accords, there's building schools there are considered illegal by the Israeli occupation, meaning that the communities, the Palestinian communities that are living in Area C, every day it's a struggle to go to school, and to have access to normal basic needs, such as even access to health, even building a house. We, as the Right to Education campaign, have been in south of Hebron, where schools there are targeted, attacked, demolished on a daily basis. And we have very limited numbers of students, female students, basically, and male students to access to education, secondary and elementary school